So again, thanks for the invitation. My time starts now because I've only got 15 minutes and I only put in about 10 slides to make sure that you got the best out of it. So this is my cover-up slide. We'll go this way. I love this image. I don't know who the artist is, but it's little Indigenous girls playing in a lagoon. It could be a freshwater lagoon because of the trees that are behind it, but it, to me, symbolises what Belmont Lagoon used to be 200 years before whites ever arrived on this continent. And so this is my way of saying thanks to the Awabakal for being custodians of Belmont Lagoon and all of Awaba for millennia, and for handing it over to us and sharing the things that are part of their culture. I think that's really important, and that's what Robbie will also introduce as part of her talk. Just so that you know where Belmont Lagoon is, this is from a, what's the word? Topographical map. Thank you. And the lagoon, if I can get this arrow to work, is there. This is in the northeast corner of the lake. And this is Pacific Ocean along here with 9 Mile Beach as part of the Belmont Wetlands holding. You'll see a number of things here that are useful in terms of ecological significance to the lagoon. All of this with their sort of leanings north due to the East Coast flows over millions of years, pushing sand up and in fact isolating the lagoon. It's not a saltwater lagoon. It's a freshwater lagoon, or it was. On this side, we have saltwater lake, of course. And so the story is, how is this, what does happen to this lagoon? The only outlet from the lagoon is this little line here, which is a creek. It's now part of Coltee Creek, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So how does the lagoon form? There are various theories on it, but one of them, where does the water come from? There are creeks and marshes and swamps, as you see these lighter coloured bits working their way down to here from Charlestown, which is up here. So there's a couple of creeks up here, Johnson's Creek and, oh, I've forgotten the other ones, but they're creeks, they're not part of rivers like the Hunter River. And this is Jules Swamp. So all of this was swampland 200 years ago when it was walked by surveyors. And all of this is representing marsh areas. So this is really flat area. Did I go the wrong direction? Okay.
What's it done? Sometimes just needs no. Click on there, try that again. Sometimes slides get clicked.
Yeah. Okay. So do we know whether the lagoon's changed? In 80 years, we have a photograph. These are aerial photographs. This one commissioned by Lake Macquarie Council. This one's dated 1941. This one's 2014 and probably represents the story today as well. As you can see from these outlines, probably the same area of surface area of water, so about 40 hectares. Probably the same kind of foliage. It's rubbish foliage really, but it's still natural bush around it. And the only real difference is a little bit of encroachment of housing and so on from the urban sprawl there that wasn't there 80 years ago. What's the problem? We'll come to that in a minute. This really gives you an indication Let's do it in two parts. What's the prognosis for the lagoon? Well, since 42, which is World War II time, BHP has put this little protuberance here, the peninsula we call it, and that was to supply air vents for BHP's mines. Two of them are right under the lagoons, as well as going out to sea, of course. But the other thing is, as wartime defence preparation, they dredged in line with that canal or the little stream that ran into the lagoon, ran out of the lagoon. They drenched Cold Tea Creek or channel, and they put a roadside along there, probably with the stuff that came out from the dredging. And so that's the track that you often walk in if you're going to walk around to a lagoon. And this is the kind of trail that I would do with those 128 surveys that I did. Now it's about 150. So it has a history. It's reasonably stable, it seems, in terms of water mass. And the bird life. What do you reckon about the bird life? That's like when you ask kids how was school today. Good. Yes, diversity of species and diversity of diet. So not only is there lakeweed for these swans that you can clearly see up the back here, but also fishlings and crustaceans and all sorts of things here for the birds that like that diet.
Does
So,
the depth vary much?
Sorry?
Does the depth vary much?
Is the
Depth.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know whether the depth's changed. Nobody measures it. The only study I've seen of depth is by a local who was a farmer, and he just went round in his little canoe and measured, and the depth was between 10 centimetres and a metre. So it sort of fits with the pickaninnies playing in the lagoon. All right, I'll keep going. We'll keep the questions to the end. So, prognosis. Well, this is the best I can do for you as a quick summary of the research that I did. Out of the 128 surveys, I came up with 120 species that I recorded during that 5-year period. And since then, I've spotted another 5. So it always surprises you what species turn up at that lagoon. That's its magic to me. And I took the results and I did 3 things. I divided them in terms of response rate, most common, those seen in the top 20% on response rate, reporting rate, sorry. The common and the least common. With the least common is just the bottom 20%. In other words, on 100 surveys, you would only see then 20 surveys or fewer. In fact, this is the thing that surprised me, that for the least common ones, there were 20% of those species that you would only see once or twice in the 5 years that I did the study. So there's a lot of visitors. The other thing that I did was to stratify them by water bird or woodland bird. And as you see from that, or if you just look at the total composition, woodland birds outnumber the water birds 2 to 1. And it's the same at each of these levels. That's telling you also that I think the woodland birds is there because of Belmont Wetlands next door. There's a lot of, I think that's 550 hectares. And we keep reforestation of that area all the time with native forest. Sorry, I'm digressing. What other studies would be comparable? The only one I found interesting and useful was one done 50 years ago by an amateur birder like myself, Glenn Holmes. And he came up with pretty well. Same names of birds. They're about the same number of water birds as they are woodland birds. Not in any particular order, but he does tend to group them. Then there's a few name changes, as you said, and some of you will know those ones. I didn't know, for example, the tailor bird is now called the golden-headed cisticola. Yeah, but tailor bird because it weaves its nest. It's worth looking up, actually, Googling. If I've got time, there are some interesting differences as well as similarities between these two profile birds 50 years apart. It's rare to have that kind of experience. The water bird's not listed by Holmes. And you have the odd ring-in, which is probably a shorebird, and it's joined the others and it's just roosting there for the time being that I saw it, but it's not a regular. And then Holmes' list doesn't include these ones. Sorry, these ones doesn't. Holmes' list does include these ones, but they're not seen at the lagoon today. Except that I have seen these ones. They're the ones that hide in the fringe on the eastern side of the lagoon, and you'll see them more likely after heavy rain because you've got more like brackish water there than salt water. So we're slowly cutting down the numbers of unseen birds from 50 years ago. And that's why this is, for me, part of a plea to have more bird watchers come to the lagoon or to 9 Mile Beach or to that corner of the lake to see what other birds are roosting around that area that I just don't get time to go and see. And this gives me hope. This came out of the annual bird report, as Dan knows. Because of this sighting by WKA in the annual bird report last year. The black bittern was seen at Belmont Lagoon. I spent 5 years there and I have not yet seen it. Similarly, we know there are Australasian bitterns at Ash Island, so why not around Belmont Lagoon? And again, this is where the walkway may open up opportunities to see that from the viewing platforms, because it's been previously inaccessible to us, the southern part of the lagoon. Two more things. I work fairly closely with the Belmont Wetlands rangers. I'm getting them interested in not only seeing what birds are there, but being able to accurately identify them. And one of them reported to me in September 2 years ago, it looked like a tall bird and it had a hooky beak. So I thought, okay, I'm not a shorebird expert either. But I thought, what if we developed a few flashcards like this and gave them to rangers or people that were interested to improve their understanding, their knowledge. So this, if I'd known this at the time, I would have done this, and it would have been a toss-up between these two. And the beauty of it is you can pick it by size, but I didn't even think of it. So thank you to all those that have helped me put together surveys and this information. And I'm looking forward to hearing Robbie now about how what the potential of the track is for opening up the lagoon and that area even more. Thank you.
Did you want to take questions?
No.
We'll do it at the end. You do all questions to at the end. Okay, that's fine. I'll then introduce Robbie and get that up and running. Okay, so thanks for that, Grahame. Something obviously many of you know, Grahame's a member of the club, and we've also got a guest visitor today, Robbie Economos, And Robbie has qualifications in both science and town planning and has worked in the Lower Hunter region in planning and environmental planning for over 3 decades. For the past 20 years or so, Robbie has worked for Lake Macquarie Council as the environmental planner, a role that is shared with Martin Folding. Included in this team is 2 fantastic biodiversity project officers with experience in GIS, Mandy McDonald and Lisa Redmond. As environmental planner, Robbie has provided environmental planning advice for developments, rezoning applications and council proposals, mainly specialising in biodiversity and threatened species. Robbie was responsible for some major strategic biodiversity projects, including Lake Macquarie Flora and Fauna guidelines, as well as background technical information for citywide strategies and local environmental plans. With this small dedicated team, resources such as Lake Macquarie's Flora and Fauna database, vegetation community mapping and species habitat distribution mapping have been produced and maintained. The habitat distribution mapping has been undertaken for over 100 threatened and species of concern, including 26 birds. Over the past 18 months, Robbie has been involved in providing environmental planning advice for the Fernleigh Awabakal Shared Track, or FAST, which is the main topic for her talk this evening. And Robbie has had the pleasure of meeting, talking to, or working with a number of club members throughout her career, so many people will be familiar with Robbie. So we'll just give Robbie a welcome and then I'll retrieve her presentation. I'll have to get rid of that. I've got to reopen PowerPoint. And then it is this one, I think, isn't it? That looks right. Yeah, that should, I'll do, where am I? Where's slideshow? There it is, from the beginning. Now, there we go. Now I've got to make sure, is that still being shared with people at home, or do I need to start sharing again? Can someone let me know?
We can only see Graham's.
You can only see Graham's, okay. And yeah, I've got to do new share. There's a new share, stop share, and I've just got to start sharing again. Thanks for that. Share screen, screen 2, share. Is that better?
Yep.
Yep, perfect. And then hopefully just check if that's working, Robbie. Try again. Yes, okay, now it's working. Okay, I'll hand over.
That's what I'm doing. That's good. So, as Grahame said, it's the Fernleigh Awabakal Shared Track, not necessarily a fast track.
Some people use it very fast.
Yeah, well, I think they'll use it faster when it's longer. So tonight I just wanted to give an outline of the project, some of the factors and options that were considered, talk about the biodiversity and the ecological factors and the offset requirements. And as we go through, hopefully there's a fair bit of interest to bird observers and how you can use the track when it's in. So just an overview of the project. It's a 1.5 kilometre shared pathway. It's on the western side of Belmont Lagoon on council land. It includes sections of boardwalk and bridges, and it will connect from Railway Parade Belmont near Belmont TAFE to Awabakal Avenue at Blacksmiths in the south. And I've got lots of maps and pictures coming up, so you'll see where that is. It's an extension of the existing Fernleigh track, which goes from Adamstown to Belmont. And it will be, that extension will mean that it's a 27 kilometre shared pathway from Newcastle to southern Lake Macquarie. So these were all the options that were considered. At the top there, that's where the existing track finishes, and this is the bottom of the northern section, and it keeps going further to the south. I've got more maps coming along. The northern section was a real dilemma in terms of where to put it. And we talked to Grahame a fair bit about, you know, what would disturb the birds less or more, and where people could see birds, because bird observing was part of the whole consideration. So I went through all these options and clicked through them pretty quickly. In the end, it ended up being on the western side of the lagoon. What was considered we had a whole lot of ecological constraints, and that's a bit fuzzy to me, but
Yeah, I think there's a blemish somewhere.
okay, so in this constraints map, the bright red is the highest ecological constraint and the most difficult to get through the planning process. So it's pretty hot around, we hatched the area that where we talked to Grahame about the areas that were quite significant from the waterbirds perspective. And as you can see, the green is a lower constraint. So that helped them, the design engineers and the project team frame up where the track could be located with least impact. But there were so many other considerations like user experience, tourism attraction, cost, heritage, noise, scenic impacts, emergency access, safety, the design standards. They have very set design standards in terms of cycleways and shared pathways, and curves have to be certain, radius, grades have to be certain, steepness, etc. Natural hazards and crime prevention were other considerations. That's a full list of the things that were considered. So it's a pretty big job. Council went out to the community and talked to the community about what their priorities would be. Things like conservation of surrounding natural environment, cultural heritage. They talked at length to the local Aboriginal people. This is the full route starting behind Belmont TAFE there, and this is the entire FAST project going down to Wobbuckle Avenue down there. It's divided into 3 sections. So we've got a southern section, a middle section, and a northern section. The southern section starts at Wobbuckle Street and goes up to the golf course called Hilda Street, that street. And then the middle section goes from Hilda Street to the Ocean Park Road. And then this is the northern section that goes past Belmont Lagoon. So there are various stages. I don't know if anyone's been down the Pacific Highway recently, but you would have seen the southern section. That's all go. A review of environmental factors been approved. It's being constructed as we speak. The middle section has a review of environmental factors approved. There's still some issues with negotiating with the golf club, so that might actually change where it goes. And the top section, the northern section, there's a development application lodged with it's actually with council, and it's before the joint regional planning panel. It requires a development application and environmental impact statement. So that's the southern section, just a close up of where that goes. That's it under construction. That's the middle section, it's Hilda Street here and Ocean Park Road there. And this is some of the works that, as a consequence of removing habitat, council has undertaken to do some compensatory habitat rehabilitation. So this is Cold Tea Creek just here. And this area here has been worked out to compensate for the amount of vegetation removed for that southern section beside the Pacific Highway and for the middle section. And that's going to be replanted and restored, and that straight onto that southern section of Belmont Lagoon just there. The other mitigation measure is the rehabilitation beside the track, between the track and the property boundaries. So the northern section, as I said, there's an environmental impact statement that's been prepared, and that's before the Joint Regional Planning Panel. It's mapped as a coastal wetland, and that's why it required a development application. It has to go through a higher level of scrutiny through the approval process. So that's the route here. And this is it in detail. So I'll just go back one. So this section is starting here. There's a segment behind the TAFE that is in for approval, but probably won't be built. But starting just here off Alex Street, The next plan shows that section from Alex Street through to here. So that's the design plan. So it starts off at a concrete path, but then turns to boardwalk. And here is a viewing platform that offers views over the lake. It's a split pathway, so people, bird watchers and other people who want to stop and look at the views don't have to contend with those speed cyclists that want to whiz past. And there's also another little pathway offshoot here. When we walk through this area with Grahame, this is pretty much the closest you actually get to the water. It's quite offers quite good views, and the mangroves are growing up as well. So I mean, to get a spot where you can actually see through them, it's really good. So this is a artist's impression of the viewing platform. It's designed by our landscape architect. It's out with Grahame and I, and it's in the shape of a moon to reflect the Aboriginal dreaming of the area that that the moon cried and formed the lagoon. So the next segment that comes back from the back of the caravan park down to Coal Tea Creek. There's another offshoot down here and a bridge over Coal Tea Creek. This goes across the reedland, so you might see some of those black bittens. I'm not sure if that will offer. They tend to be on the edge a bit, don't they, Grahame? Right. The black bittens tend to be on the edge of the reeds more so than in the middle. Yeah. So I mean, the track's utilising the disturbed area as much as possible on the side of the lagoon rather than going through it. But here they really needed to get a good cycleway design, I suppose, and meet the Australian standards, which was quite difficult with this bridge and this construction here. So it actually had to come across the reedland. So there's another little offshoot down here to separate cyclists and people. That looks like that. And there's, for those of you that know the area, there's actually a mound here. So that offshoot will go up the mound, and that offers really nice views across the Fragmites and Estuarine wetland. That's the old bridge. And the new bridge, this is an artist's impression of the new bridge going there, and there's the offshoot just going around there. The new bridge is a teardrop design. It's reflecting again the Aboriginal culture of the moon crying tears. And that's the bottom section, and the compensatory habitat that I talked about is just in here. There's Coal Tea Creek just over here. So there's an absolute raft of environmental studies for the project. 5 endangered, threatened ecological communities that are affected by the proposal, albeit some of them more than others. There's native vegetation corridors throughout the area that council had to be mindful of, very important for birds and other fauna trying to move through that area, and you see it breaks down around where the golf course is. They're all the records of fauna, the current records, 51 threatened and migratory species have been recorded in the vicinity of the project. There's a koala down there, but that was a koala taken into care at Belmont, so it's not a real record. That's just a close-up of those, but it's a bit hard to see. Wallen froglet is one of the species that has been recorded in Belmont Lagoon and the Belmont Wetland area, the large Melaleuca wetland a bit further south. So, and these are some of the habitat mappings that we took into consideration. That one is the region honeyeater. So these are the predictive habitat mapping that council's done that show where certain species will be. It's just a few examples of those. It's about 8 of them, I think, that were taken into consideration. So there's swift parrot, this one's swift parrot, Regent Honeyeater was the one earlier. And this one's the curlew sandpiper. So there's Belmont Lagoon there, it's one record there. So just to, I guess, to bring home how lots of time means that you find more species compared to Grahame's 125 species of birds. The consultants that did this, the EIS came up with 6 threatened species, being the eastern curlew, the eastern osprey, and then the pied oystercatcher. So those are threatened birds that occurred in the area, along with, and the white-bellied sea eagle. The Wallen froglet that's pretty much the only really new record of threatened species in the area, and that's those 2 blue ones up the top there. So as far as offsetting for the northern section, it's in accordance with the Biodiversity Conservation Act, and that's half a hectare of threatened ecological community, and council has to either pay into the fund or offset in some other way. The ecosystem credits are done through the EECs or ecosystem credits, and then the other species that have to be offset is the Wallen froglet and swift parrot. So and that's required by the Biodiversity Conservation Act. The middle section and the southern section, the offset that council's doing to rehabilitate the 1.3 hectares off Coal-T Creek is entirely voluntary, and council's just doing that because they're good citizens and they like to set an example. So that's pretty much all I have, unless you want to see lots of species lists.
Like that photograph, actually.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
The communications team have all the good photos, so yeah, I just stopped working from them. I think they must get to go up an aircraft.
Yeah. That's you know, I've been to the site a number of times.
Yeah.
You kind of feel a bit disconnected from the lagoon because you don't really see it very easily, do you, Grahame? It's kind of hidden from view, and hopefully this western access might just kind of give a little bit more exposure, a little bit of connectivity back to the lagoon. But,
So that there is where that viewing platform is going to be.
Yeah.
There'll be an offshoot just there, and then this is the bridge on over Coal-T Creek, and there'll be an offshoot just going around that pile of fill there, and hopefully views across from that offshoot.
Well, we'll give a round of applause to Robbie.